صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Brothers and sisters in Islam, thank you so much for attending tonight's lecture, which will be, of course, the final lecture in our Ramadan series. We hope that you found it enlightening, and we hope to see you again for our future sessions, particularly the Muharram one that will be upcoming in summertime, inshallah. And of course, a few points before we begin. Namely, the food basket, as always, I like to remind the brothers and sisters to donate non-perishable food items, especially as we're in this time of Ramadan. And the second point is, of course, I would like to thank Sheikh Hamam in a big, immense way for giving us this opportunity to hear him enlighten us with his great knowledge during this holy month. And I would also like to give an announcement after about future programs and other points, inshallah, after tonight's lecture. And so with that, please welcome Sheikh Hamam with a loud salawat.
أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على المصطفى محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Brothers and sisters in Islam, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May Allah Ta'ala accept your deeds during the holy month of Ramadan and your upcoming deeds during the remaining days and nights and hours of this holy month. Yesterday we began a topic that we did not finish, and that is, how can we preserve our religiosity and spirituality after the end of the month of Ramadan? Especially that during the month of Ramadan we feel a lot of spirituality, a high degree of spirituality, whereas with some people, when the month of Ramadan ends, they feel that their spirituality all of a sudden drops and they go back to their bad habits, the habits they had before the holy month. So how can we preserve our religiosity? How can we preserve our spirituality after the month of Ramadan, during the months of Shawwal, Dhul-Qa'dah, Dhul-Hijjah, and other Islamic months? We mentioned, if you remember, a narration by Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullah salamu alayh, in which one of his she-slaves described the salat, the prayer of the Imam alayhi salam during the month of Ramadan. She was asked about his prayer, how would he pray, when would he pray during the month of Ramadan. And so the she-slave, she said that for Ali there was no difference between the month of Ramadan and Shawwal. There was no difference, in the sense that his behavior would not change. Obviously there's a big difference between Shahr Ramadan and Shawwal. Shahr Ramadan is what? The greatest month. It is the holiest month in the Islamic calendar. But she told whoever was asking her that for Ali salawatullah alayh, Shahr Ramadan and Shawwal were the same in the sense that his behavior would not change. he would worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He would stay up in worship throughout the nights of Shahr Ramadan and the nights of Shawwal. We want to be like our commander alayhi salatu wassalam. We want to follow his lead. I'm not saying that we should stay up and worship every single night. No. What I'm saying is that we want to maintain our religiosity, our piety and spirituality after the month of Ramadan. So how can that be done? Yesterday we mentioned one extremely important recommendation, and that is preserving our salat. Salat is key. Salat is a very important deed, a fundamental deed that we need to focus on. With the presence of salat in our lives, we'll be much closer to obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through different deeds. We'll be much closer to passing, the daily tasks that we go through. Whereas without salat, we're weak. Without salat, we're prone to fall into sin. Salat, subhanallah, creates a spiritual force field that protects you from the satanic whispers. It protects you from the tactics of the devil. That's what Ahlul Bayt alayhim salatu wasalam mentioned. And so, preserving the prayer by ensuring that we're praying correctly, we're praying on time, and also we're focusing in our prayer is very important. What else can be done? One might ask. Well, you can do many other deeds that will help you maintain your religiosity. The main issue is to create an Islamic atmosphere, what I personally like to call an Islamic bubble. Creating that Islamic bubble for yourself is very important, not only to remain faithful or pious or spiritual after the month of Ramadan, but also to preserve your Islamic identity, especially in the West and in our era. Creating the Islamic atmosphere, creating the Islamic bubble is extremely important for yourself, your family, and for your children. Some of you might not have children at the moment, but sooner or later you will get married and you will become fathers or mothers. It is extremely important to take the right steps to preserve the faith of your children, to preserve the faith of our children. Very important, especially with the challenges and difficulties that we are facing today. How can we do that? We need to create our own Islamic atmosphere as we live in the West. So you're telling us that we should kind of draw away from non-Muslims and draw ourselves away from our societies? No, we're not saying that. We're saying when you live in the West, live with your society, live with your community, but create the atmosphere, the Islamic atmosphere, which will stop you from sacrificing your beliefs or practices or morals. So you live among society, you work, you go to work, you go to buy, for example, your groceries, etc. But at the same time, you maintain your religiosity, you ensure that you're not crossing any limits Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not want you to cross. How can we create that Islamic bubble? You can do it by taking several steps. I won't have enough time to mention all the steps tonight, but we'll mention some. Aside from performing salat and preserving your salat, being around the right people is key. Being around who? People who are God-fearing. People who remind you of Allah and of your Islamic duties. Whereas being around the wrong people, people who are distant from God, and who distance you from Allah, people who make you forget about God and the hereafter, that is dangerous. Hence, if someone wants to create the Islamic atmosphere we're talking about for himself and for his family and children, then he needs to be around who? Around the right people. Around people who care about their hereafter. Not around those who can care less about heaven, hell, and Allah's commands, Azza wa Jal. Sometimes you find yourself in a situation where you can't be around the right people. You can't. You're in a place, in a city where you don't know other individuals who are believers and who are pious. What should be done in this case? In this case, remaining alone, remaining by yourself is better. It's better than mixing with people who will make you forget Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whereas when you have the opportunity to be with the right people, which is the case for us, alhamdulillah, in this city, then being with those individuals would be better than remaining on your own, than remaining by yourself. This has been mentioned by Ahlul Bayt, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhim, in multiple narrations. Let me share a few with you tonight. The first tradition is found in Al-Kafi. It's actually part of a long piece of advice that Imam Al-Kadhim alayhi salam, Musa ibn Ja'far, presents to his companion Hisham ibn al-Hakam. Imam Al-Kadhim had a long discussion with Hisham rahimahullah about the intellect and intellectuals. I recommend you to read the narration. It's found in Al-Kafi, in the first or second chapter of Al-Kafi. In it he tells him, الصبر على الوحدة علامة على قوة العقل. He tells him that when someone remains by himself and remains patient over that loneliness, that in itself is a sign that this person has a strong intellect. Here Imam Al-Kadhim is encouraging us to distance ourselves from people. Which type of people? Not everyone. Rather, the people who make you forget God. The people who distance you from your religion. And thus he says, alayhi salam, فَمَنْ عَقَلَ عَنِ اللَّهِ اعتزل أهل الدنيا والراغبين فيها. He says, if someone understands Allah's message, someone has a good understanding of Allah, His attributes, the hereafter, a good understanding of this world and what should be done, he has a good understanding of Allah's message subhanahu wa ta'ala, what will he do? اعتزل أهل الدنيا. He will distance himself from who? From the people who favor our current life, dunya, over the hereafter. وَالرَّاغِبِينَ فِيهَا. Those who have interest in this world, such that they will sacrifice the blessings of heaven for the temporary, unlawful pleasures of this world. Then he says, وَرَغِبَ فِيمَا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ أَنِيسَهُ فِي الْوَحْشَةِ. That person who distances himself from such people, he will turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and will have interest in gaining Allah's gifts, Allah's bounties, Allah's mercy, and Allah's guidance. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will become that person's friend. He will be anisahu fil wahsha. When he feels lonely, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will comfort him. وَصَاحِبَهُ فِي الْوَحْدَةِ. When he'll be by himself, Allah ta'ala will be his companion. وَغِنَاهُ فِي الْعَيْلَةِ. When he goes through poverty, Allah ta'ala will enrich him. وَمُعِزُّهُ مِنْ غَيْرِ عَشِيرَةِ. And Allah ta'ala will empower that individual. He'll be the source of strength the source of power for that person, even if he does not have a family or a tribe with him. So the Imam is telling us what? He's telling us two main points. If you have the option of being with the wrong people or being by yourself, then choose the latter. Because being with the wrong people will destroy your fate in the hereafter. Secondly, he's saying, if you are making that sacrifice, you're detaching yourself from people who distance you from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah Azza wa Jalla will be your friend. As in, Allah Ta'ala will compensate you when He sees that you've done that sacrifice. So if you feel lonely, Allah will comfort you. If you're weak, Allah will empower you. If you go through states of financial difficulty, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala somehow will enrich you. He'll be there for you. He will be your friend. Jalla Jalaluhu. Then again, the same Imam, Musa ibn Ja'far salawatullah wa salamu alayhi, the same Imam, tells you in another narration, he tells you to be with the right people. So don't misunderstand the Imam. The Imam, Musa ibn Ja'far, the Imams of Ahlul Bayt aren't saying that we should completely detach ourselves from our communities. No. They're saying detach yourself from who? People who make you forget Allah, who make you forget Al-Jannah. People who call you towards what is unlawful, or who misguide you. Whereas, if you have friends who are believers, if you know people who are God-fearing, then make sure to be with them. Make sure to meet them. At least, every once in a while. Once a week, or once every 2 weeks, if not every day. Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam says, in a narration you find in Bihar al-Anwar, when he speaks about how to divide our time. How should I divide my time? How should I divide, for example, my day? He says, اجتهدوا في أن يكون زمانكم 4 ساعات. Exert effort in dividing your time into 4 hours. When we say hours here, we're not literally talking about 60 minutes. Rather, we're talking about an amount of time. That amount of time could be 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 5 hours, God knows. Most importantly, the Imam is saying, ensure that you divide your day or your time in general into 4 different time intervals. He says, ساعة لمناجاة الله. Number 1, the first hour is the hour in which you speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The hour of worship. The hour in which you supplicate, you pray, you read Quran, etc. وَسَاعَةٌ لِأَمْرِ الْمَعَاشِ. Number 2, the second hour is the hour in which you seek your livelihood. The hour in which you study, for example, or you work. وَسَاعَةٌ لِمُعَاشَرَةِ الْإِخْوَانِ والثقات الذين يعرفونكم عيوبكم ويخلصون لكم في الباطن. Number 3 is the hour in which you meet. Who? You meet your brothers in faith. If you're a brother. If you're a sister, you meet your sisters in faith. لمعاشرة الإخوان والثقات الذين يعرفونكم عيوبكم ويخلصون لكم في الباطن. He says it's the hour in which you meet your brothers in faith. Which brothers? Those who truly love you. Those who have sincere intentions towards you. As in, they're not treacherous. They don't have a specific agenda that they're trying to implement on you. They don't want to take advantage of you. No. They truly love you. And because of that, they notify you about your faults. Maybe not in a direct manner, as in they might not tell you, you have this problem and this is how you fix it. Rather, they might notify you about your faults in an indirect manner. But long story short, when they see you doing something wrong, or they see that there's a flaw in your character, they try to help you remove that flaw. Which means these brothers in faith help you get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They help you elevate. Those are the kinds of people that we want to be with. So here Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam is telling you what? Yes, be around such brothers. These brothers will contribute in making you more pious. Finally he says alayhi salam, وَسَاعَةٌ تُخْلُونَ فِيهَا لِلَذَّاتِكُمْ فِي غَيْرِ مُحَرَّمٍ وَبِهَذِهِ السَّاعَةِ تَقْدِرُونَ على الثلاث ساعات. He says the last hour, the fourth hour, is the hour of lawful leisure, the hour in which you do something that you desire without committing a sin. So you do something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows you to do, something that you desire, but it is at the same time lawful. Then the Imam says alayhi salam, he says, through this hour, the person will be able to carry out his duties pertaining to the other 3 hours. The hour of worship, the hour of seeking livelihood, and the hour in which he meets his brothers in faith. So if we want to create an Islamic atmosphere for ourselves, one very important step, one major step, is to ensure that we're around the right people and we're not hanging out or mixing with the wrong people. People who will distance us from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you remember, a few days back we did mention the importance of choosing the good friend and disassociating ourselves from the bad friend. We mentioned how the bad friend misleads you and how on the day of judgment the human being will regret having a relationship of friendship with that bad friend. Here I recall a story pertaining to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi that Allama al-Tabrasi rahmatullah alayhi mentions in his tafsir Majma' al-Bayan. He says that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi would sit down with his companions, and most of them or some of them were poor, like Salman rahimahullah, Ammar bin Yasir, Bilal bin Rabah rahmatullah alayhim. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam did not care whether they were poor or not. His message was a worldly message. In better terms, it was a message for all people. He invited everyone to Islam. And when these mu'mineen who were poor accepted Islam, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam embraced them. However, some polytheists did not like this. They were inclining towards entering Islam, but they did not like the fact that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was sitting down with poor mu'mineen. And so they came to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and they told him, Ya Rasulullah, we don't mind attending your gathering. In fact, we're willing to come, sit down with you, and hear your words. We're willing to come. We're willing to become part of your team. But we have one request. Tell these believers, these poor people who sit beside you, to go away from you. Tell them to distance themselves from you, because we don't want to smell the scent of their armpits. That's what they said. Tell them to go away, Ya Rasulullah. If you do that, we'll sit down with you. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought down a verse in Surah Al-Kahf, verse 28, where he says subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَاصْبِرْ نَفْسَكَ مع الذين يدعون ربهم بالغداة والعشي يريدون وجهه ولا تعد عيناك عنهم تريد زينة الحياة الدنيا, and withhold yourself with those who call on their Lord morning and evening, desiring His pleasure, and let not your eyes pass from them, desiring the beauties of this world's life. What was Allah telling him? He was telling him, Ya Rasulullah, disregard the request of these polytheists. Their request is foolish. They're not sincere, Ya Rasulullah. Had they been sincere, they would not have made such a request, telling you to distance the poor mu'mineen, the poor believers, to push them away from you. Disregard their request and keep yourselves with those poor believers. Why? Because they are sincere. Because they're true believers who want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when the verse came down, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam rose and he sought his companions. Which companions? The poor ones. Salman, for example, Ammar, Bilal. He was looking for them and he found them in the latter part of the mosque. When he saw them, he said, all praise belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who kept me alive until He commanded me to be with men amongst my nation. I will live with you and I will die with you. Meaning, no one will be able to separate me from you, O my noble companions. Addressing the believers. So one major step, if we want to create that Islamic atmosphere, the Islamic bubble that we're talking about, is keeping ourselves with the right people and detaching ourselves from people who are not mindful of God Jalla Jalaluh. Alright, let's say I meet with my brothers in faith. Then what? What should we talk about? Is there something that we should mention? Is it recommended to say certain things when we're together? Or are we allowed to speak about any topic? Well, in general, as long as you're not saying anything unlawful, you're not saying anything haram, then you can talk about any topic. But when you meet, it is recommended to mention Muhammad wa al Muhammad salawatullahi alayhim. Which means that whenever you converse with your faithful friends or brothers in faith, ensure that part of the conversation, I'm not saying the whole conversation, part of it is dedicated to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Mention them alayhim salam. Speak about their qualities. Mention a word that was said by one of the infallibles alayhim salam. And share your thoughts, share what you understand in regards to that word. Mention Ahlul Bayt in some way or form. Why? Because that will bring mercy into that gathering. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bestow upon you mercy when you do so. How do you know? You might tell me. I know from the hadith, the narration of Imam al-Sadiq salawatullah wa salamu alayhi. There's a narration that I believe many of you have heard, found in Qurb al-Isnad, the book Qurb al-Isnad. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam one day asks his companion al-Fudayl. He tells him, تَجْلِسُونَ وَتَحَدَّثُونَ? Do you sit down with each other and do you converse? When he says do you converse, he's asking him, do you mention our words Ahlul Bayt? Do you speak with each other about our teachings or not? What did Fudayl say? He said, yes. May I be sacrificed for you. So the Imam said, alayhi salam, listen carefully. Ja'far al-Sadiq is talking, not me. إِنَّ تِلْكَ الْمَجَالِسَ أُحِبُّهَا. Surely I love those gatherings. Ja'far al-Sadiq is talking, saying, I love those gatherings. فَأَحْيُوا أَمْرَنَا يَا فُضَيْلِ. So revive our affairs, O Fudayl. Reviving their affairs means what? It means mention their words, mention their stances, mention their teachings alayhimus salam, their stories. فَرَحِمَ اللَّهُ مَنْ أَحْيَا أَمْرَنَا. May Allah bless He who revives our affairs. Question. Two questions actually. Do we want Allah's mercy? Yes or no? Yes. Number two. Is Imam al-Sadiq's prayer accepted? Of course, right? It's Ja'far al-Sadiq salawatullah salamu alayhi. If Ja'far al-Sadiq's prayer or supplication is not accepted, then no one's prayer or supplication will be accepted. The Imam alayhi salam himself is saying, Rahim Allah. May Allah Ta'ala bless He who revives our affairs. Which means, if you mention Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, their teachings, their words, their wisdoms, etc., then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bestow mercy upon you. You will be amongst those who are marhumin. And as a result, you will be saved in the hereafter. Their remembrance itself is a huge blessing. Mentioning Ahlul Bayt, remembering them, that in itself is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Believe it or not, their remembrance might change a person's life. Their remembrance might guide someone who's completely misguided. Imam al-Baqir in a second tradition says, alayhi salam, a short yet deep statement. He says, Inna hadithana yuhyi al-qulub. Surely our narration, our words, revive the hearts. Heart here means souls. If you find someone who has a dead soul, meaning someone who's misguided, is there hope that his soul will be revived? The Imam says yes. Bring him to us. Teach him our words. If he accepts our words, his soul will be revived. So we understand from the tradition of the Imam alayhi salam that if you're going through ghafla, through a state of spiritual sleep, by merely reading the narrations of Ahlul Bayt or listening to them, you will wake up. The Imam goes far beyond that. He tells you if someone's soul is not asleep, if it's dead, we'll revive it with our words. Their words are miraculous. They're the words of God subhanahu wa ta'ala, because they are the proofs of Allah Jalla Jalaluh. One day, their remembrance guided two individuals. The simple dhikr, the simple invocation of salawat, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad, guided two men. How? How did that simple dhikr guide two individuals? Listen to the following story. It's a story that contains a lot of lessons. You can find it in Al-Kafi. We'll conclude the lecture with it, inshallah ta'ala. There was a man called Yazid bin Khalifa. He was not Shia. And then he became Shia. When he became Shia, he came to Medina to visit Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. And so he sought permission to enter upon the Imam. Permission was given. He came in, he sat down and saluted the Imam. And he told him, I am from the tribe of Al-Harith ibn Ka'b. And I am one of your followers, Ahlul Bayt. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guided me to you. He guided me to your love. Hence I became one of your followers. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam told him, what guided you to us when we only have a small amount of followers from the tribe of Al-Harith bin Ka'b? It seems the majority of the tribe were people who opposed Ahlul Bayt. So he told him, I was guided because of my slave. How? He said, I had a Persian slave, a slave from Khurasan. And that slave of mine had 4 friends. They were also Persian. Every Friday, they would meet. The 5 individuals, the 5 Persians would meet. And one of them would host the gathering. One of them would feed the others. So every 5 weeks, my slave would be the host of that gathering. And when his friends would come to him, he would offer them meat. They would eat. After they would finish, he would bring a container containing nabidh. What's nabidh? It was an alcoholic beverage. So you can consider it a type of wine. That's haram, obviously. He would bring a container containing what? Nabidh. And then he'd bring a cup, and he'd fill the cup with nabidh, and then he would give it to his companions. Then he would tell them, you cannot drink until you say, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. One might ask, were they doing something right or wrong? Obviously it was wrong. They were drinking an alcoholic beverage. That's majorly haram. But that Persian slave remembered Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, continued to remember Ahlul Bayt and to ask Allah Ta'ala to send His blessings upon them alayhim salam. Yazid bin Khalifa says, because of that salawat, when he would tell his friends, you cannot drink until you say Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad, Allah Ta'ala guided me to you. As in, he would hear him. You have to say Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. He heard about Al Muhammad, and that led him to investigating about Ahlul Bayt and then believing in Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. This was his story. What did Imam al-Sadiq do alayhi salam? The Imam told him, take care of that Persian slave. Take care of him. And convey him my salam. The salam of Ja'far al-Sadiq. And tell him, Ja'far ibn Muhammad tells you, look at the beverage that you are drinking. If drinking a large amount of it intoxicates you, then do not drink it at all. Do not drink even a small amount of that beverage. Why? Because Rasulullah said, sallallahu alayhi wa he said, kullu muskirin haram. Every intoxicant is unlawful. And Rasulullah also said, ma askara kathiruhu faqaliluhu haram. If a specific beverage or thing intoxicates you when you consume it in abundance, when you consume an abundant amount of it, then consuming a small amount of that beverage or thing is unlawful. This was the message of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. Yazid bin Khalifa went back to his slave and he told him, Ja'far al-Sadiq tells you Salamu alaykum. When he heard that, he was shocked. My master Ja'far bin Muhammad tells me Salamu alaykum. My master paid attention to me. He told him yes. And he told me to take care of you. And then he conveyed the message regarding the intoxicant, how he should avoid consuming it, because if consuming a large amount of it intoxicates him, then consuming a small amount will be unlawful. Then he told him, I, Yazid bin Khalifa, have set you free for the sake of Allah. Why? Because Imam al-Sadiq told him, take care of your slave. So he told him, I set you free. At that point the slave said, from now until the day I die, I will not drink that beverage. So you realize that the mere dhikr, the invocation of salawat, contributed in guiding 2 people. Yazid bin Khalifa was guided to Shi'ism because of that remembrance, because of that invocation. And the slave was also guided on a practical level as he avoided drinking the intoxicant after he heard the message of the Imam alayhi salam, because he preserved the dhikr of Salat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. That tells you a lot, my brothers and sisters, of the impeccable effect, the unfelt effect of remembering Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salatu was-salam and mentioning their teachings. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep us with Ahlul Bayt salawatullahi alayhim, walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, wa sallallahu ala al-Mustafa Muhammad wa alihi al-tahirin.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa alihi. Sheikh, now on behalf of Al Hussein Youth, we would like to honor you with this gift. Please welcome it and salawat. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Thank you, brothers and sisters, for attending these Ramadan lecture series. As I mentioned in the beginning, we really hope you enjoyed it and found it enlightening. Again, a big thank you to Sheikh Hamam for enlightening us through this time. And as usual, a couple of reminders. As I mentioned before, we would like to ask the brothers and sisters to donate non-perishable food items. That would be much appreciated, especially during this time of Ramadan. And the final points I would like to mention is that we will be having, inshallah, future programs, namely, of course, Muharram in summer. But we would also appreciate any feedback whatsoever. We will have forms that you can scan, QR codes that you can scan, so that you can provide feedback, not just on the lectures in general, but anything to do with the program. And that way we can, move forward and try to improve the programs in the future, inshallah. And with that, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Before we go as well, there's actually one surprise that we would like to do a gift. I will let Sister Azat present it. Please welcome her with a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Please welcome, yes. Please welcome Sheikh Hamam with a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Thank you, brothers and sisters. You may now proceed for wudu, and we will, inshallah, do the salah. Thank you.